The first time I heard my mother call me stupid, I was standing in her kitchen holding a bag of organic produce that cost more than my first car payment. The words weren't even directed at me. She was on speakerphone, probably thinking I'd already left after dropping off her weekly groceries. My name is Reagan, and I've spent the last 6 years being the perfect daughter. The one who shows up every Saturday with fresh groceries, who covers Elias's utility bills when he's just getting back on his feet, and who smiles through 3-hour family dinners where my mother tells her friends how blessed she is to have such a devoted child. Reagan's always been our rock, Mom was saying into the phone as I stood frozen in the doorway. Ever since she got that engineering job, she's been so generous with us. I should have left then. Should have set down the kale and fancy cheese and walked away. But I stayed, caught in that familiar daughter trance of wanting to hear more, to know what she really thought of me. Oh, she owes us, Mom continued laughing. After all we've done. The words hit like ice water. I must have made some sound because Mom spun around, her perfectly lined eyes widening. Reagan, I didn't hear you come back in. She quickly ended the call. Did you remember the organic butter? It's in the bag, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Along with everything else on your list. You're such a sweetheart. She started unpacking the groceries, chattering about her book club and Dad's golf scores. I nodded, smiled, played my part. Oh, before I forget, she added, Elias called. His electricity's about to be cut off again. Would you be a dear and handle it? I finished. Sure, Mom. I'll take care of it. That's my girl, she beamed. We're so lucky to have you. I was halfway to my car when I remembered I'd forgotten to grab my package. A new planner I'd had delivered to their address because of porch pirates in my apartment complex. Heading back in, I found the pile of mail on the counter. That's when I saw it. A thick envelope with my name on it, marked, Final Notice of Repayment Default, in angry red letters. Mom? I called out. What's this? But she disappeared upstairs, probably to call her friend back. I opened the envelope, my hands shaking slightly. Inside was a loan statement for $50,000, in my name, a loan I'd never taken out. My phone buzzed. A text from Elias. Hey sis, can you handle that electric bill today? Kind of urgent. I stared at the message, then back at the loan statement. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but something was off. The loop in the G was wrong, the slant too steep. Another text from Elias. Also, maybe spot me some grocery money? Love you. I took a photo of the loan document and slipped it back into the envelope. Mom's voice drifted down from upstairs, laughing again. No, she hasn't noticed anything, she was saying. Reagan's always been trusting. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Scarlett, my best friend. Still on for coffee tomorrow? I typed back quickly. Yes, and I need your help with something. Upstairs, Mom was still talking. We raised her right. She knows family comes first. I walked out quietly, leaving the groceries unpacked on the counter. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. The evening sun caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, I really looked at myself. The perfect daughter, the reliable sister, the eternal ATM. My phone lit up with another text from Elias. Sis? About that bill. I started the car without responding. Tomorrow, I'd talk to Scarlett. Tomorrow, I'd start digging. Tomorrow, I'd find out exactly what my loving family had been doing with my name and trust. But today? Today I finally understood why Mom always insisted I have my important mail sent to their house. Why Elias always needed just a little help. Why Dad kept telling me I didn't need to check my credit score because family takes care of family. I pulled out of their driveway for what I didn't know would be the last normal time. Behind me, the house looked exactly the same. Warm, familiar, safe. But now I knew better. Now I knew that sometimes the most dangerous predators live right where you call home. Holy shit, Scarlett whispered. spreading the documents across her kitchen table. Holy actual shit, Reagan. I'd spent the morning pulling my credit reports. What I found made me wish I hadn't. 5 personal loans, 3 credit cards, 2 car loans, for cars I'd never seen. All in my name, all opened within the last 3 years. Look at these signatures, Scarlett said, laying out the loan applications side by side. They're close, but not quite right. Someone's been practicing your signature. My credit score, once near perfect, had plummeted to 520. The total debt was enough to make me feel physically sick. $286,000. I think I know who did this, I said, pointing to one of the employment verification forms. See this pay stub? I only ever shared these with Elias when he was helping me organize my taxes last year. Scarlett's face darkened. That little weasel. Want me to go break his legs? I want to talk to him first. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, probably wondering why I hadn't paid Elias's electric bill yet. I need to hear him say it. You're not going alone, Scarlett insisted, grabbing her keys. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to Elias's apartment complex. The same one I'd been paying half his rent for, claiming he was building his business. He opened the door in sweatpants, looking annoyed. Sis, what's with ignoring my texts? The electric company's breathing down my neck. I pushed past him into the apartment. Brand new gaming setup, designer sneakers, a watch that definitely wasn't from Target. Nice stuff, I said, my voice eerily calm. Business must be booming. Oh yeah, he smiled, relaxing. Things are picking up, but you know how it is with cash flow. I dropped the loan statements on his coffee table. Sure do. Cash seems to be flowing right out of my name and into yours. His face didn't change, but his eyes did. A flicker of panic, quickly masked. What are you talking about? Cut the crap, Scarlett snapped from behind me. We've got the documents. We can see the forged signatures. Forged? Elias laughed, but it sounded hollow. Come on, sis. You're being dramatic. Mom and Dad handle all that stuff. You know that. Handle what stuff exactly? The family finances. They said you agreed to help, that you wanted to contribute since you're doing so well. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. Funny, because I'm looking at my actual contributions right now. Rent help, $15,000. Utility bills, $8,000. Weekly groceries, $24,000. Car insurance for you and Dad, $12,000. And that's just last year. Reagan, but that wasn't enough, was it? My voice cracked slightly. You needed more. So you took my pay stubs, practiced my signature, and decided to help yourself to my credit too. He stepped toward me, hands up. Listen, it's not what you think. We're family. Everything gets paid back eventually. When? I demanded. How? You can't even pay your own electric bill. Don't be like this, he pleaded. Mom and Dad will be so hurt if you make a big deal about it. They only wanted to help me get started. By destroying my credit? By stealing my identity? It's not stealing when it's family, he shouted. God, you're so ungrateful. After everything they've done for you. Scarlett moved between us. Everything they've done? You mean raising her? That's called being a parent, you moron. It's not a debt she has to repay. My phone buzzed. Mom again. This time I answered, putting it on speaker. Reagan, honey, is everything okay? Elias says you're at his place acting strange. Did you know about the loans, Mom? A pause. Too long. What loans, sweetie? Don't. My voice was ice now. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Another pause. Then, in a completely different tone, we'll discuss this as a family. Come over for dinner tonight. I hung up. Looked at my brother, this stranger wearing my trust like a cheap suit. The electric company's breathing down your neck, I said quietly. Wait until the fraud department starts breathing down yours. You wouldn't, he whispered. We're blood. Blood isn't a blank check, Elias. I walked to the door, then turned back. And by the way, those utility bills you couldn't pay? They were never actually late, were they? You just wanted extra cash. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Come on, Scarlett said, guiding me out. We need to get to the bank before it closes. Then we're calling the police. In the car, my phone kept buzzing. Texts from Mom, Dad, Elias, all saying the same thing. Family first. Don't do anything rash. We need to talk. I turned off my phone. Family first, they said. Fine. Time to show them exactly what that means. The voice recorder was smaller than my palm. A tiny black rectangle Scarlett had picked up from the electronics store. Just in case, she'd said. People show their true colors when they think no one's listening. I slipped it under my parents' kitchen counter during Sunday dinner. Right behind the cookie jar, Mom always kept filled with my favorite chocolate chip cookies. The same cookies she'd made when I got my first period, my first heartbreak, my first job offer. Reagan, honey, Mom said now, refilling my wine glass without asking. We should talk about those silly loan documents you mentioned. Dad looked up from his pot roast. Your mother's right. You seem confused about some things. I'm not confused, I said, keeping my voice steady. I saw the documents. I saw the signatures. Well, of course you did, Mom laughed too brightly. We've always handled things as a family. You knew that. No, I didn't. Don't be difficult, Dad cut in. You've done so well for yourself. It's only natural to help your brother get started. Family takes care of family. I stared at my wine glass, remembering all the dinners like this one. All the times they'd praised me while reaching for my wallet. I need some air, I said, standing up. Save me some dessert? Mom beamed. Of course, sweetie. We'll sort this all out. I drove around the block and parked, waiting. 2 hours later, I watched them leave for their weekly bridge game. The house dark, I slipped back in, using my key, and retrieved the recorder. In my car, I pressed play. She's actually upset about this? Dad's voice, incredulous. After everything we've given her? She'll get over it, Mom replied. She always does. Remember when she found out we used her college fund for the boat? God, she's too stupid to notice half the things we do. Elias's voice now. Remember when she believed that story about me needing rent money because I was robbed? Laughter. My mother's voice again. At least she's good for something. Unlike you, Elias. When are you going to get a real job? Why should I? Reagan's credit score is doing all the work. More laughter. Speaking of which, Dad cut in, we need another car loan. The Mercedes is... I stopped the recording, my hands shaking. 6 years of family dinners. 6 years of, we're so proud of you. 6 years of lies. My phone buzzed. A text from Scarlett. How'd it go? I drove to her place, the recorder feeling like a bomb in my pocket. She opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. Play it, she said. We sat on her couch as their voices filled the room. With each laugh, each casual mention of their theft, each mockery of my trust, I felt something inside me harden. I'm going to be sick, I whispered when it finished. No, Scarlett said firmly. You're going to be smart. You're going to be strategic. And you're going to make them pay. She pulled out her laptop, opened a document. I've been doing research. Identity theft within families is more common than you'd think. But it's still a felony. They're my parents, I said weakly. No. They're criminals who happen to raise you. There's a difference. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elias. Hey sis, about that electric bill. Look at this, Scarlett said, pointing to her screen. Maximum sentence for identity theft. 30 years. Minimum, 2 years. Plus, restitution. Another text from Mom. Honey, we need to discuss the family finances. Come over tomorrow? I thought about the recorder, still warm in my pocket. Thought about years of manipulation hidden behind maternal smiles and family dinners. They think I'm stupid, I said quietly. They think I'll just roll over and take it. So prove them wrong. I pulled out my phone, typed a reply to Mom. Can't tomorrow, but I'll come by Saturday. We'll sort everything out then. What are you planning? Scarlett asked. I opened my banking app, started canceling automatic payments. They want to talk finances? Fine. But first, I'm going to gather every piece of evidence, every forged document, every fake signature, every recorded conversation. And then I'm going to serve it to them like one of Mom's Sunday dinners. I looked at Scarlett, feeling something close to peace. They think this ends with tears and manipulation? I'm going to end it with handcuffs. My phone buzzed one last time. Dad. Don't do anything you'll regret, Princess. Family first, remember? I turned off my phone, thinking of the recorder's revelations, of years of theft hidden behind parental concern, of my brother's laughter as he mocked my trust. Yeah, Dad, I whispered. Family first. And it's time this family learned about consequences. Ms. Reagan? The bank investigator, Lewis, adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents spread across his desk. This is extensive. I'd spent the week gathering evidence. Every fraudulent loan application, every forged signature, every recorded conversation. The stack of papers between us told a story of systematic theft spanning years. The employment verification forms, Lewis continued, these were definitely manipulated. See how the dates don't quite align with the company letterhead? My brother had access to my original pay stubs, I explained. He helped with my taxes last year. Lewis nodded, making notes. And these credit card applications, all approved within days of each other. That should have triggered fraud alerts. They had my social security number, my mother's maiden name, every security question answer. Because they were your parents. He looked up, his professional demeanor softening slightly. This happens more often than you'd think. Family fraud is particularly insidious because... My phone buzzed. Mom again. Honey, the bank's been calling us. What have you done? I showed Lewis the text. They know something's wrong. The automatic payments I canceled. Good, he said, surprising me. Let them worry. We've frozen all the fraudulent accounts. Now we wait for them to make mistakes. As if on cue, my phone rang. Elias. Should I answer? Lewis pressed record on his desk device and nodded. Reagan. Elias's voice was frantic. What the hell? My car got repossessed this morning. The car bought with a fraudulent loan in my name? Don't be dramatic. I was going to make the payments. Like you made the utility payments? The ones you lied about being late? A pause. Then lower. You're making a huge mistake. Mom and Dad are furious. They said if you don't fix this... Fix what exactly? The identity theft? The fraud? The years of stealing? We're family, he shouted. You can't do this to family. Watch me. I hung up. Lewis was already noting the time and date of the call. That's an implicit admission of guilt, he said. We can use that. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad. Princess, your mother's crying. Is this how you repay us for everything we've done? Before I could respond, Lewis's office phone rang. His expression changed as he listened. They're trying to empty the accounts, he said after hanging up. All of them, even the legitimate ones. Can they do that? They're trying, but we've flagged everything. He started typing rapidly. And they just made our job much easier. Attempting to hide assets after fraud discovery? That's another charge. A knock at the door. A woman in a police uniform entered, badge displayed. Detective Smith, she introduced herself. I've been assigned to your case. Mind if I sit in? For the next hour, we walked through everything. The loans, the forged documents, the recordings. With each piece of evidence, Detective Smith's expression grew darker. The premeditation here is stunning, she said finally. The systematic abuse of trust. The calculated nature of the theft. She looked at me directly. You understand this will mean criminal charges? Prison time? I nodded, my throat tight. They're your parents, she said gently. Are you sure you want to proceed? My phone buzzed one final time. A group text from Mom to the family. Reagan's confused. She's always been emotional, always needed guidance. That's why we managed her finances. She'll understand once she calms down. Family meeting tonight? Mandatory. I showed them the text. Still manipulating, Detective Smith observed. Still trying to control the narrative. And you? Lewis asked. What's your narrative? I thought about years of Saturday groceries, of utility bills and rent checks, of praise that came with price tags, of family dinners seasoned with mockery. My narrative? I pulled out one final document, a handwritten note I'd found in Elias's apartment during a legal search. His sloppy handwriting bragging about his latest loan from his stupid sister. My narrative is simple, I said. They committed fraud. They stole my identity. They betrayed my trust. And now they face consequences. Detective Smith nodded, gathering her files. We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow. Formal statements, warrant applications. And then we arrest them, all of them. She paused at the door. Fair warning, family fraud cases get ugly. They'll say horrible things. Try to turn others against you. Are you ready for that? I thought of the recordings, of their laughter at my expense, of years of calculated theft hidden behind parental concern. They already say horrible things, I replied. The only difference is now they'll say them to my face. As I left the bank, my phone lit up with another group text. This time from Dad. Family meeting, 7 p.m. Don't disappoint us again, Princess. I smiled, thinking of the arrest warrants being prepared. Don't worry, Dad, I whispered. I won't. The lasagna was Mom's recipe, the same one she'd taught me when I was 12, standing on a step stool to reach the counter. I served it with garlic bread, just like she always did. A perfect family dinner. This is wonderful, honey, Mom beamed, taking another bite. I'm so glad we're all here to talk things through. Dad nodded, reaching for more bread. Family should always work things out together. Elias sat quietly, pushing food around his plate. He'd been jumpy since arriving, his eyes darting between me and the door. You're right, I said, standing to get the wine. We should talk about everything, all the family secrets. Now, Princess, Dad started, about those bank calls. One moment, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. Let me play you something first. Their recorded voices filled the dining room. She's too stupid to notice. Reagan's credit score is doing all the work. Remember when she believed? Mom's fork clattered to her plate. Dad's face turned red. Elias looked like he might throw up. That's illegal, Dad sputtered. You can't record people without... Like forging loan documents is legal? I pulled out the first stack of papers from my bag. Speaking of which, let's review your creative writing. Reagan, Mom's voice turned sharp. Put those away. We can discuss this like adults. You mean like how you discussed destroying my credit behind my back? Or how you laughed about stealing my college fund? We raised you. Dad slammed his fist on the table. Everything we did was for this family. Really? I laid out the loan documents one by one. The Mercedes was for family? Elias's gaming setup? Your cruise to Alaska? You ungrateful little... Mom started. Here's my favorite part, I continued, pulling out more papers. The bank's fraud department found something interesting. You didn't just steal from me. You were planning to take out more loans. Had the applications ready and everything. Elias stood abruptly. I'm leaving. Sit down, I said quietly. We're not done with family dinner. You can't tell me what to... Sit. Down. He sat. Now. I pulled out 3 identical folders, placed one in front of each of them. Here's everything. Every forged document. every fraudulent loan, every recorded conversation, all stamped and verified by the bank's fraud division. Mom's hands shook as she opened her folder. You wouldn't dare. We're your parents. Funny thing about parents, I said, checking my watch. They're supposed to protect their children, not steal from them. The doorbell rang. Expecting someone? Dad's voice was dangerous now. Actually, yes. I stood to answer it. I invited a few more people to our family dinner. Detective Smith stood at the door with 2 uniformed officers. Good evening, she said, stepping inside. I hope we're not interrupting dessert. The scene exploded. Mom screamed. Dad lunged for the back door, but found another officer waiting. Elias just sat there, staring at his folder like it might disappear if he looked hard enough. Brianna, Jarrett, and Elias, Detective Smith read from her papers. You're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. As the officers began reading rights and applying handcuffs, Mom turned to me one last time. How could you? She sobbed. After everything we've done for you? That's just it, Mom. I gathered the folders while an officer secured her hands. You didn't do anything for me. Everything was for you. Always. We'll fight this, Dad growled as they led him out. You think anyone will believe you over your own parents? The evidence speaks for itself, Detective Smith answered for me. And attempting to empty those accounts yesterday? Not your smartest move. Elias was the last to be cuffed. He stopped beside me on his way out. You know what this means, right? He whispered. You'll have no one left. No family at all. I thought about Scarlett, waiting at her place with ice cream and support. About Detective Smith's quiet understanding. About the bank investigators' respect. I already have a family, I replied. Just not the one that stole from me? After they left, I stood in my silent dining room. Half-eaten lasagna grew cold on plates they'd never finish. Mom's wine glass still held her lipstick print. Dad's napkin lay crumpled where he'd thrown it. My phone buzzed. Scarlett. Is it done? I looked around at the remnants of our last family dinner. At the empty chairs where manipulation once sat disguised as love. At the space where family first meant you last. It's done, I typed back. They're gone. You okay? I touched Mom's lipstick-stained glass, thinking of all the family dinners that would never happen again. All the Sunday calls that wouldn't come. All the holidays that would feel different now. No, I replied honestly, but I will be. You've got 6 new voicemails, Scarlett announced, scrolling through my phone. 3 from your mom's bridge club, 2 from your dad's golf buddies, and 1 from, your Aunt Margaret. Want to hear them? I was curled up on her couch, 3 days after the arrests, still wearing the same sweatshirt I'd put on that morning. Are they awful? Let's find out. She pressed play on speakerphone. How dare you do this to your parents? Aunt Margaret's voice filled the room. They gave you everything. I always said you were an ungrateful... Scarlett deleted it mid-rant. Next? Reagan, honey. Mrs. Peterson from Bridge Club cooed. Your mother's beside herself in that horrible place. Surely we can work something out. Just drop the charges and... delete. You think you're so smart? Mr. Wilson, Dad's golf partner, growled. Your father built you up from nothing, and this is how you... delete. I buried my face in a cushion. The whole community's turning against me. Not everyone, Scarlett corrected, showing me her phone. Look at your work email. I scrolled through dozens of messages from colleagues. Saw the news. You're incredibly brave. My sister went through something similar. Here if you need to talk. Those monsters didn't deserve you. My phone rang. Detective Smith. Reagan, we found something you need to see. Can you come to the station? 20 minutes later, I stared at more documents spread across the detective's desk. A joint account? I whispered. In my name? Opened 6 months ago, she confirmed. They were planning to drain it right before skipping town. Found the flight confirmations on your father's laptop. How much? Almost everything you have. They had paperwork ready to transfer your entire savings. My hands shook as I read the transfer forms. My signature, forged again, authorizing the movement of my life savings to an offshore account. But I found it first, Lewis said, walking in with fresh papers. We've frozen everything. They can't touch it now. They were going to take everything, I said numbly. Just disappear with my money? That's not all, Detective Smith added gently. We found this in your mother's email. She handed me a printed email chain. My mother's words glowed on the page. Reagan's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Once the money's transferred, we'll tell her we're taking a family vacation. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone. She's too soft to come after us anyway. When? I asked. When were they planning this? Next month, Lewis replied. Right after they took out 2 more loans in your name. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Elias. Made bail. We need to talk. Don't, Detective Smith warned. Anything you say could compromise the case. Another text. Come on, sis. Coffee at Joe's? For old time's sake? He made bail? Scarlett asked incredulously. Rich grandparents, Detective Smith explained. But your parents are still in custody. The flight risk is too high. My phone kept buzzing. Reagan, please. I can explain everything. What do I do? I looked at Detective Smith. She considered for a moment. Meet him. Wear a wire. Let's see what he has to say. An hour later, I sat across from Elias at our old coffee spot. He looked terrible. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. You look awful, I said. Prison does that. He stirred his coffee endlessly. Listen, about everything. Save it. I saw the transfer forms. The escape plans. He flinched. That wasn't my idea. Mom and Dad were going to steal my life savings and disappear. And you knew. I was going to warn you. He leaned forward. Eventually, once I got my share. The casual cruelty of it struck me silent. Come on, sis, he tried, smiling. We can fix this. Just drop the charges. We're still family. Family? I stood up slowly. You were going to let them steal everything I had. You forged my signature. You laughed about it. Reagan? No. We're not family. We're not anything anymore. I walked out, his calls following me. What did you think was going to happen? You're nothing without us. In my car, I pressed the wire's stop button. Detective Smith's voice came through my earpiece. We got it all. Good work. I drove to Scarlett's, where she waited with wine and understanding. You okay? She asked as I collapsed on her couch. No, I admitted. But at least now I know. Know what? I thought of Elias's words, of Mom's emails, of Dad's escape plans, that sometimes losing your family, I said quietly, is better than letting them destroy you. Ms. Reagan? My office receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. There's a man here insisting on seeing you. Says he's your father. I froze over my blueprints. 2 weeks since the arrests, and they still wouldn't leave me alone. Call security, I replied, and then call Detective Smith. Through my office window, I watched security escort Dad from the building. He looked smaller somehow, his golf polo wrinkled, his usual confident stride reduced to an old man's shuffle. My phone buzzed. Scarlett. Your mom's friends are outside my apartment again. Want me to call the cops? Before I could reply, an email notification popped up. From Brianna. Subject. Please read. Your mother needs you. Your father lost his job today. Our reputation is ruined. Is this what you wanted? To destroy your family? We raised you better than this. If you drop the charges now, we can still... Delete. My desk phone rang. Lewis from the bank. Good news, he said without preamble. We've cleared the last fraudulent account. Your credit score should start recovering soon. And the liens? All removed. You're officially free and clear. Free. The word felt strange, like a new shirt that didn't quite fit yet. Another email arrived, this time from Detective Smith. Court date set for next month. Prosecution wants to meet tomorrow to prep your testimony. Also, you should know, your brother's been talking. Wants a deal. Says he has more evidence about their plans. I closed my laptop, gathered my things. Outside, the summer air felt heavy with approaching rain. Reagan! I turned to find Mrs. Peterson, Mom's bridge partner, hurrying across the parking lot. Please, she called, just listen. Your mother's not eating. She's desperate to talk to you. Surely you can find it in your heart. Like she found it in her heart to steal from me? The words came out sharper than I intended. To laugh about it. To plan her escape with my money. But she's your mother. No, I said quietly. She's a thief, who happened to give birth to me. There's a difference. At home, I found more messages. Voicemails from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all suddenly experts on family loyalty. Emails from Dad's golf club friends, suggesting I was mentally unstable. A letter from Mom's church group, praying for my lost soul. My phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Reagan? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. This is your Aunt Sarah. Your mother's sister? I hadn't heard from her in 15 years. What do you want? To tell you you're not crazy. And you're not alone. She paused. They did the same thing to me. Years ago. That's why I disappeared. I sat down hard. What? Your mother and father. They stole my inheritance, forged my signature. When I threatened to go to the police, they turned the whole family against me. Her voice cracked. Sound familiar? Why didn't you ever say anything? Who would have believed me? They were the perfect couple, the loving parents, the pillars of the community. She laughed bitterly. I saw the news. Finally, someone stood up to them. After we hung up, I sat in my dark apartment, thinking about patterns, about cycles of abuse dressed up as family loyalty, about how sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiveness. It's saying, enough. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Elias. Prosecutor offered me a deal. Tell them everything about Mom and Dad's plans. Less jail time. A pause then. Should I take it? I thought about family loyalty, about the brother who forged my signature while laughing at my trust, about the parents who raised me to be an ATM. Yes, I typed back. Tell them everything. Another text arrived immediately. They'll never forgive me. I looked at the framed engineering degree on my wall, the one I'd earned while they were stealing my future. At the business cards with my name on them. At the life I'd built that they'd tried to take. Their forgiveness doesn't matter anymore, I replied. Neither does mine. Thunder cracked outside. The summer storm finally breaking. My phone lit up one final time. Detective Smith. Loan fraud case closed. All liabilities expunged. I walked to my window, watched lightning split the sky. Thought about Aunt Sarah, vanished for 15 years because no one would believe her. About all the family dinners where love came with interest rates. The rain fell harder, washing everything clean. Tomorrow I'd meet with the prosecutors. Next month, I'd testify. But tonight I'd let the storm rage outside while I stayed safe and dry, finally free from the people who thought love was something you could steal. Guilty on all counts. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. Mom collapsed into Dad's arms. Elias stared at the floor. I sat between Scarlett and Aunt Sarah, breathing for what felt like the first time in months. The defendant Brianna will serve 5 years, the judge continued. Jarrett, 4 years. Elias, 18 months with possibility of parole, in consideration of his cooperation. Mom turned to face me, her mascara running. Reagan, please, Don't let them do this. The bailiff stepped between us as they were led away. Dad wouldn't look at me. Elias mouthed, "I'm sorry," as they took him through a different door. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with microphones. "How does it feel to send your parents to prison?" "Any comments on the verdict? What would you say to other victims of family fraud?" Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand. "You don't owe them anything," but I stepped forward anyway. "I'd say that love shouldn't come with loan documents. That family isn't a business transaction, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no to the people who raised you to say yes." Back at my apartment, Scarlett opened wine while Sarah ordered pizza. "I have something to show you," Sarah said, pulling out her laptop. "Remember how I mentioned others might come forward?" She opened a website, familyfraudsurvivors.org. The homepage showed my story, alongside dozens of others. The comment section overflowed with similar tales. My parents did this to me, too. Finally, someone spoke up. "You gave me courage to check my credit score." "It's gone viral," Scarlett said, scrolling through. "You're helping people, Reagan." My phone buzzed. "Detective Smith. Thought you'd want to know. Your parents' house just sold at auction. Restitution payments will start next week." I walked to my window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Mom and Dad were heading to separate prisons. Elias to a minimum security facility. Their perfect family facade finally shattered. The doorbell rang. Lewis from the bank. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, holding up a folder, "but I thought you'd want to see this in person." Inside was a single document. My new credit report. Score, 810. "How?" I whispered. "Turns out when you help bust a major fraud ring, credit agencies pay attention." He smiled. "Congratulations. You're free and clear." Sarah came to stand beside me. "Speaking of clear," she handed me another document. "I had my lawyer draw this up. Legal name change papers. Just needed my signature." "You don't have to keep their name," she said softly. "You don't have to carry them with you anymore." I thought about Mom's maiden name. No, that carried too much history. Thought about making up something new. But then I looked at Scarlett, who'd stood by me through everything. "Actually," I said, "I know exactly what name I want." I filled out the form. Reagan Wise. "Your last name?" Scarlett's eyes welled up. "Really? You're more family than they ever were." My phone buzzed one last time. An email from the Family Fraud Survivors website. "Would you consider speaking at our next support group? Your story is helping so many people realize they're not alone." I looked around my apartment. At Scarlett, my chosen sister. At Sarah, the aunt who understood. At Lewis, who'd helped me rebuild. At the life I'd reclaimed. "Yes," I typed back. "I'll tell them everything." "Pizza's here," Scarlett called from the kitchen. "And I got garlic bread." I smiled, remembering other family dinners, other garlic bread, other versions of love that came with conditions. "Coming," I called back. "Save me a slice." Sarah caught my arm as I passed. "You okay?" I thought about Mom's tears in court, Dad's averted eyes, Elias's whispered apology. Thought about the weight of their name I'd finally set down. "You know what?" I said. "I really am." We gathered around my coffee table. My new family, chosen and true. No loans to discuss, no guilt to serve, no love to earn. Just pizza and wine and people who saw me for who I was, not what I could give them. Outside, the city hummed with life. Somewhere in that buzz, other families sat down to dinner. Some whole, some broken, some wearing masks of perfection while hiding rot beneath. But here, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. With exactly who I needed to be with. Reagan Wise. It fit perfectly, like finally coming home to myself.
Larry's words hit harder than I expected as he swaggered into my hospital room with a smug smile. "You can't even handle the simplest tasks at home. Maybe we should just get a divorce," he said coldly. Beside him was a woman I didn't recognize, attached to a tangle of medical equipment. I stayed silent, absorbing the scene. Larry had no idea how much money I had, $10 million, to be exact. His divorce suggestion was almost laughable when I thought about the stakes for someone like me, a housewife. The clarity in my decision grew stronger. I couldn't stay with someone who would degrade me in my most vulnerable moment. With a quiet resolve, I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers I'd kept prepared for this very moment. I handed them over, my smile unshaken as Larry took them from me. "I'll be happier with her, don't worry," Larry declared, casually wrapping his arm around the woman, whom he introduced as Brenda. Brenda shot me a patronizing look and added, "Take care, ma'am, you're not a miss anymore." Their laughter echoed as they left the room. For a brief second, I watched them go, feeling only a faint pang before a burst of laughter escaped me. It was Friday, and by Monday, the divorce would be official. Just 4 days until my freedom, and my heart raced at the thought. My name is Natalie Ruth, a 40-year-old housewife living on a farm. While I may not have many extraordinary talents, I pride myself on my cooking skills. My husband, Larry, and I are the same age and met back in college. After we graduated, we left the countryside and settled in Florida. Just the two of us. I cooked for Larry with fresh vegetables and rice sent from my family. Many believed my cooking was what kept him happy, and I agreed. But household chores? That was never his thing. From the beginning, I took care of Larry, and after marriage, nothing changed. We didn't have children, but we shared a love for food and often took short trips to find new dishes to enjoy. In our early years, Larry was gentle and kind, but around the second year of our marriage, things shifted. He became more controlling, never violent, but his biting words left scars. I soon realized he didn't see the value in a full-time housewife like me, and I started to keep quiet, too tired to argue. Larry initially landed a high-paying job right after college, but within 5 years, he left. After that, he jumped from one job to another, leaving our financial situation in constant turmoil. The stress, paired with his worsening attitude, weighed heavily on our relationship. Yet I kept the home together, hoping for things to improve. For the past 3 years, he'd been at a job he seemed content with, and I quietly held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time, he'd stay. Then one day, unexpectedly, he came home early. "I'm home, I quit my job," he announced nonchalantly. "What, again?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. His face darkened. I saw his brow twitch, his irritation rising. Quickly, I backtracked. "Sorry, I didn't mean it that way, just shocked." "No welcome back?" I tried to soften my tone, but he snapped back. "You've gotten bold." I could see the storm in his eyes, so I kept my voice low, careful not to escalate things. "I'm sorry," I muttered, and he seemed to relax enough to sit down on the couch, grumbling as he turned on the TV. I placed a beer and glass on the table. "Dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he grumbled. I slipped back into the role of the dutiful wife, one I had played for the past 10 years. After he had his fill of food and drink, Larry fell asleep on the couch, snoring loudly. The table, now a mess of discarded bottles and food scraps, looked like a disaster zone. As I cleaned, I thought back to when things were easier, before Larry changed. Before our marriage became a series of compromises. I glanced at him, asleep and oblivious, and wondered if it was finally time to break free. The next day, while Larry set off to look for another job, I went to the city office and signed the divorce papers. I wasn't ready to file them yet, but having them gave me some peace of mind. I tucked them discreetly into my bag, wondering what Larry would do if he ever found them. "Where'd you go while I was job hunting?" he asked when I returned home. "I went to buy some resumes for you. Thought you might need them," I answered, handing him a small stack. He looked at them curiously but quickly lightened up. He mentioned meeting a friend for drinks and left soon after. His new job was with a solid company that offered a better salary and benefits than his last one. Maybe this time, I thought, he would stick around long enough to retire. Larry started spending more evenings out, leaving me with precious moments of solitude. I used this time to gather my thoughts and regain my strength. One afternoon, my mother called with exciting news. It had been a while since we last spoke, and she couldn't contain her excitement. "We had our mountains and lands appraised, and they're worth $9 million, she exclaimed. "We only need $5 million for our retirement, so you need to think about what this means for you." My mother had always been wary of Larry, especially as he grew more controlling and isolated me from my childhood home. The windfall was a shock, but what stunned me even more was that my mother had transferred the property titles from my grandmother to me, to avoid inheritance taxes. Now, with a heavy decision weighing on me, I debated whether to share the news with Larry or keep it as my own secret leverage, a means to secure my newfound freedom. A week later, life took another unexpected turn. I was involved in a car accident. Thankfully, the injuries weren't life-threatening, but they required a week-long stay in the hospital. After locking up my valuables in the room's drawer, I reluctantly dialed Larry's number. "I'm sorry, I got hurt," I said, my voice tinged with the exhaustion of the moment. His response, predictably, was self-centered. But what about my meals?" he asked with no sign of concern for me. I fought to keep my frustration in check and explained, "I'll be in the hospital for a week. Could you manage without me until then?" His reply, void of any empathy, stung. That night, I had planned to talk to him about the inheritance, but his dismissive reaction made me rethink everything. With a cold resolve, I pulled out the divorce papers I had kept hidden in my bag, almost like a shield, and handed them to Larry. My smile was forced, but my heart was steady. "Here, I guess it's time to say goodbye," I said. Larry took the papers, a smug grin spreading across his face. "I'll be happier with her," he declared, his arm wrapping around the young woman, who leaned in with a mocking tone. "Take care, madam," she sneered. "Oh wait, you're not a madam anymore. Take care, old lady." Their laughter echoed in my ears as they left, but instead of bitterness, I felt a strange sense of relief. Free from his cruelty, I was finally in control of my life, with a significant inheritance and a future to rebuild on my own terms. Friday came, and as I lay in the hospital bed, a burst of laughter bubbled up inside me. The divorce papers had been handed over, and by Monday, the process would be complete. The weekend passed in peaceful silence, a welcome break from the chaos, though it felt strangely unsettling, as I was so used to his constant demands. On Monday evening, my phone started ringing non-stop. After nearly half an hour of persistent calls, I decided to answer. "Why didn't you file the papers?" Larry's furious voice blasted through the phone. His outrage only made me laugh harder, which, in turn, seemed to only fuel his anger. "I've already filed a notice of non-acceptance," I told him between chuckles, reminding him of all the empty threats he'd made over the years. He was livid, demanding that I withdraw it, but I was no longer the woman who jumped at his every whim. Calmly, I told him that nothing could be done until I was discharged from the hospital, and that we'd have to resolve it at the municipal office when the time came. His selfishness was almost laughable, but it didn't stop there. In a rush, Larry blurted out that he planned to register his marriage with Brenda, the woman he'd introduced as his new partner. He quickly corrected himself, realizing he had revealed too much too soon. When I teasingly asked if her name was Kaveen and if she was his mistress, Larry responded bluntly, "She's my new wife, and technically your mistress since we're not divorced yet." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were stating a simple fact. I kept my composure, knowing his words were meant to provoke, and his frustration only grew as I remained unfazed. Finally, deciding to strike a more serious note, I informed him that he would be hearing from my lawyer regarding the division of our assets. I reminded him how I had always managed our home and remained faithful, while pointing out his own role in the collapse of our marriage. Larry seemed genuinely puzzled, almost as if my inability to perform housework from a hospital bed was somehow a betrayal. I patiently explained that being hospitalized didn't equate to neglect, and that his lack of support during this time spoke volumes about his true character. The conversation ended with Larry flustered, an image vastly different from the confident, self-assured man who had strutted out of the hospital room just days before. As I lay in my hospital bed recovering, the absurdity of Larry's expectations became clearer. He seemed to believe that I was still responsible for his well-being, even in the face of my injury, equating my inability to take care of housework with some form of failure on my part. His logic was so skewed that it would be laughable in front of a judge. Still, despite his gradual realization that he had crossed a line, he stubbornly clung to the idea that he was justified, especially now that he had Brenda by his side, and he claimed he no longer needed me. I reminded him sharply that his secret relationship with Brenda amounted to cheating, a point he stubbornly refused to accept. His circular arguments were growing tiresome, so I decisively cut the conversation short, telling him to communicate through our lawyers from that point on. I hung up, ignoring the flood of calls that followed until he finally gave up. However, the peace was short-lived. The next morning, my phone began ringing relentlessly from 8 a.m. When I finally answered, Larry was on the other end, ranting about being unable to withdraw money from a bank account. He seemed utterly confused as to why he couldn't access funds from what he assumed was a joint account. "Are you trying to withdraw from my personal account?" I asked, and when he confirmed he was, his anger flared. I had already taken precautionary steps, calling the bank ahead of time to temporarily block any withdrawals while I was in the hospital, knowing Larry's tendency to act impulsively. Larry, however, seemed unable to grasp the simple logic that I had protected myself from potential financial exploitation. He demanded I authorize a withdrawal immediately, failing to see the impropriety of trying to access funds from an account belonging to someone he was in the process of divorcing. I calmly explained that we were essentially strangers now, and I had no obligation to finance a stranger's needs. My newfound assertiveness stunned him, but it felt right. After 12 years of marriage, I had finally learned to stand my ground. He insisted that I send him money, even suggesting I owed him compensation for not performing household duties. It was almost absurd. After all these years, Larry had failed to grasp the basic concept of respect and personal responsibility. I repeated that any financial settlements would be handled through our lawyers, and his frustration grew. In a fit of rage, he threatened to visit me in the hospital. Unfazed, I calmly responded that if he did, I was prepared. I had already informed the nursing staff to only allow visits from my parents, anticipating his attempts to barge in. Larry, undeterred, tried to visit but was stopped at the nurse's station. Frustrated, he turned to flooding my phone with calls and messages. I saved them as evidence and contacted my lawyer, who quickly intervened, halting the barrage of notifications. Just when I thought the drama had subsided, an unexpected twist came. I was told that, grateful for Denise's unwavering support and the strength of our 15-year friendship, I left the hospital the next day with newfound resolve. I headed to a private dining room at a restaurant where a meeting had been arranged. To my surprise, when I arrived, I found Larry and Brenda already seated, casually enjoying an expensive traditional meal. Larry, ever the audacious one, had the nerve to remind me to bring money to cover their meal. Unshaken, I refused, telling them to settle their bill themselves. I was there to assert my rights to the assets, not to subsidize their lunch. Ignoring Larry's snide comments, I and my lawyer sat down and began laying out the case. We presented clear evidence, legal documents and statements highlighting Larry's faults and the terms for the division of property. The papers made it plain that the responsibility for the dissolution of our marriage was his alone, and I was ready to defend my interests with determination. The meeting, meant to settle the terms of the divorce, took place in that private dining room, with Larry, Brenda, my lawyer, and unexpectedly, Denise. As Larry and Brenda ate, blissfully unaware of the confrontation about to unfold, my lawyer and I unveiled a series of damning photographs. These photos, taken by Denise, showed Larry and Brenda together, and even more shockingly, captured Brenda entering a hotel with another man. The guilt and surprise were written all over their faces as they stopped mid-meal. Just then, Denise walked in, confirming she was the one who had taken the photos. Brenda's face fell when she realized her aunt was involved in this meeting. Denise, loyal to me, expressed her disappointment in Brenda's actions but reiterated her commitment to our friendship. Despite seeking compensation from Brenda for her behavior, in the heat of the confrontation, Brenda blurted out that she was pregnant. The claim stunned Larry, but it quickly unraveled when Denise, unconvinced, noted that Brenda showed no visible signs of pregnancy. Under pressure, Brenda admitted the pregnancy story was a fabrication, a ploy to secure Larry's commitment. She confessed that her tactic was to target affluent older men, and her web of lies began to unravel. Larry, caught in his own deceit, was left speechless. Denise, ever the voice of reason, took charge of the situation and led a contrite Brenda away, promising a formal apology later. Left alone with me, Larry scrambled to salvage whatever he could of our relationship. He pleaded for a fresh start, even attempting to use my lack of recent work experience against me, suggesting I couldn't make it on my own. Calmly, I rejected his advances and revealed my substantial personal net worth, around $10 million, acquired through inheritance funds that were not part of our marital assets. With my financial independence secure, I reiterated my intention to move forward with the divorce. The fallout was swift. Under pressure from her family, Brenda transferred a sum of money into my account as compensation, and her mother made sure she worked to make amends. As for Larry, now estranged from his family, he faced serious repercussions. He was fired from his job, his reputation tarnished by his indiscretions, and was forced to take on multiple construction jobs to manage his mounting debts. Once the divorce was finalized, I redirected the money I received to charity and made the bold decision to relocate to the countryside, starting a new life on my own terms. Meanwhile, Denise and I reignited our friendship. We made plans to remain single, live together, and indulge in our shared passions for food and travel. Together, we looked forward to embarking on culinary adventures, taking short trips, and celebrating the freedom and strength of our bond. Excitement filled me as I prepared for a future where I could live authentically, true to myself, and embrace the joy of newfound freedom. Hello, I'm Bella, 31 years old. I stay at home to manage our household. My husband, Jerry, who is 4 years older, and I have been living with his parents, Henry and Marilyn, for the past 3 years. Both Henry and Marilyn are in their 60s and in good health. Marilyn, Jerry's mother, is particularly sociable and has an active social life. Since moving in, I've noticed that Marilyn rarely helps with household chores. Despite not working outside the home, she was previously a stay-at-home mom, but now she leaves most of the housework to me. Occasionally, Marilyn encourages me to take some time for myself. But if everything isn't spotless when she returns, she's quick to criticize. I've tried talking to her about it, explaining that I might not finish all the chores before she heads out, but she dismisses my concerns. She often tells me that managing a busy home is normal, claiming my generation just doesn't handle it as well as hers did. Marilyn frequently praises Jerry, who has a prominent job, and often compares us, pointing out that he works hard while I, in her view, don't measure up. Jerry's reaction doesn't help. During meals, when Marilyn complains about my efforts, he simply says, "Oh, really?" without offering any support. Initially, I admired Jerry's maturity, but now I feel like I've become little more than the household manager, even when I'm working late into the night. The situation has become more challenging, and I wish Jerry would see my efforts. Instead, he doesn't directly confront me but tosses laundry in my direction and curtly says, "Handle that too." I sometimes regret marrying him because he's changed so much since our wedding. On our first anniversary, he brought home a cake but also playfully smashed a pie in my face, laughing it off. It's hard to believe he's an adult. One positive presence is my father-in-law, Henry. He's calm and checks if I need help with anything, providing the only kindness I experience in this household. Since leaving my job to marry Jerry, Henry has been someone I confide in, and I see him almost like a father. But with Henry working during the day, I often find myself alone with Marilyn. She sometimes accuses me of flirting with Henry, citing Jerry's neglect as the reason. These accusations come when Henry isn't around, and when I try to defend myself, she mocks me, making hurtful comments. When I tried to talk to Jerry about this, hoping he'd understand it was just Marilyn's unfounded suspicions, he laughed, saying I was into older men now. I was shocked, realizing nothing would change. I hadn't expected Jerry to suddenly start helping with chores or to stand up to Marilyn's criticism, but his response was a painful disappointment. I felt increasingly out of place. One summer day, Marilyn mentioned a family trip during Jerry's break. Initially, I thought she was just excited about a family outing, but then she unexpectedly asked if I wanted to join. Her invitation surprised me. I assumed they might go without me. When I hesitated, Marilyn looked suspicious, questioning if I wanted to come or not. Her invitation made me uneasy, and I was uncertain of her intentions, especially if I chose not to go. That evening, Jerry brought up the trip again, curious if I'd join. I told him about the invitation, and to my surprise, he burst out laughing, feeling confused. I asked why he found it funny, but he brushed it off. On the day of the trip, it was just Jerry, Marilyn, and me in the car, with Jerry driving, Marilyn in the front seat, and me in the back. Henry couldn't join us initially due to work. As we drove, I felt increasingly anxious, unable to see their faces from the back seat. Midway through the drive, Marilyn turned to me and asked, "Did you withdraw money for the trip?" I nodded, mentioning I had taken out a few hundred. Her pleased reaction struck me as a bit odd, but I brushed it off. Soon, I noticed we'd driven past the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Didn't we just pass the inn?" I asked. Jerry answered with a vague smile, mentioning that a tourist spot lay just ahead, and that we'd check in afterward, but his smile felt forced, and an uneasy feeling began to creep over me. The farther we drove, the more remote the surroundings became. Lush greenery replaced any sign of buildings, and soon we arrived at a small, secluded dam with no one else around. "Let's get out and stretch our legs," Marilyn suggested, and Jerry added, "Just don't leave anything valuable in the car." Obeying their instructions, I stepped out, feeling wary of the unexpected detour. As I shut the car door, I noticed Marilyn and Jerry lingering, pretending to adjust something inside the car. Suddenly, I heard the click of the locks. Jerry's laughter rang out as he looked at me through the partially rolled-down window. "What's going on?" I asked, confused and starting to feel a rush of anger. "Are we staying here for the night?" "Oh, Bella," Marilyn sneered, smirking, "you really walked right into this, didn't you?" Jerry clutched his stomach, laughing. "Have fun out here, Bella. Maybe you can eat some grass and sleep under the stars," he jeered, holding up my wallet. Then, he rolled up the window completely, and they drove off, their laughter echoing behind them. I stood in shock, watching them disappear down the road, realizing they'd left me without my wallet or phone. But instead of panicking, I focused on finding my way back. After what felt like hours, I managed to find my way to the inn we'd initially planned to stay at. When I entered the lobby, Jerry and Marilyn were already there, looking relaxed, until they spotted me. "What?" Jerry exclaimed, his face paling. "How are you here? Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" He looked at me as if I'd risen from the dead, while Marilyn stood beside him, her face drained of color. I thought briefly about playing along with his ghost theory, but I simply smiled. "I'm no ghost, Jerry, and yes, I'll be staying here tonight." I held up the key to my room, where I had already placed my things. His expression shifted to confusion, and then annoyance. "What are you doing with the key? Did you take it from our room?" he demanded, reaching for it. But this time, I was prepared. I firmly held my ground, refusing to let him intimidate me. Suddenly, a man stepped forward, gripping Jerry's arm with authority. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance," he said firmly. He was about the same age as Henry but taller and more commanding. Jerry looked stunned, and Marilyn immediately began to protest. "Who are you? Are you staff? You can't interfere like this, I'll have you reported," she snapped. The man, unbothered, introduced himself calmly. "I apologize for not introducing myself sooner. I am the owner of this inn." Jerry instantly backed off, releasing his hold. I recognized the owner from my college days and felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing I had an unexpected ally. I remembered visiting this area with friends one summer. It had been a sweltering day, and we'd gotten lost trying to find our accommodation. During our detour, we came across a young girl collapsed by the roadside. She turned out to be Kelly, the inn owner's daughter. We called an ambulance and stayed with her until help arrived. The next day, her father, the inn owner, visited us to thank us personally. "You saved my daughter's life. I can't thank you enough," he'd said gratefully, then extended an invitation. "Next time you're in town, please stay with us, no charge." Since then, my family and I had visited the inn a few times, and I'd come to know the owner well. Now, as he confronted my husband and Marilyn, he maintained a polite tone, but I could sense his simmering anger. In fact, both he and I were aware of their scheme all along. 3 weeks prior, I'd grown suspicious of the sudden trip invitation. To confirm my instincts, I discreetly placed a voice recorder in the living room, capturing conversations when they thought I was out of earshot, like during my bath or while I was doing laundry. Listening to the recordings was shocking. My husband and Marilyn openly plotted. "Let's ditch Bella somewhere, maybe near that dam an hour from the inn," Marilyn had suggested, laughing. "It'll be hilarious." The chilling realization of their intentions drove me to contact the inn owner, who was appalled, having experienced his daughter's heatstroke firsthand. He felt personally invested in my safety and was outraged by their cruelty. Together, we coordinated a plan. Just after my husband and Marilyn abandoned me, the inn owner's driver would pick me up. As it turned out, the driver was none other than Kelly, the same girl I had helped years ago. "I finally got my license. Let's go for a drive," she said with a bright smile. Though surprised, I felt reassured as we headed back to the inn, stopping for local ice cream and laughing together. Even though I knew I'd be rescued, the ordeal had left me anxious, but Kelly navigated confidently, and we arrived well before my husband and Marilyn. Back at the inn, the owner addressed Marilyn directly. "You mentioned something about suing us, ma'am?" he said with an icy edge. "Yes, I did. How dare you accuse us?" Marilyn snapped defiantly. The owner's voice hardened. "I'm sorry, but you're not our guests," he said coolly. "What? This is outrageous," Marilyn and my husband shouted, fuming. "Your reservations have been cancelled," the owner replied firmly. My husband's face twisted in anger. "Who do you think you are?" he sneered, but the owner remained calm. "Bella is our guest here. You too, however, left her stranded and stole her wallet," the owner replied calmly. "Our inn doesn't tolerate criminal behavior." "You can't be serious," my husband protested. "I work for a respected company." At that moment, Henry walked in, immediately sensing the tension. "What's going on here?" he asked. My husband and Marilyn quickly tried to twist the story, complaining about the inn's unjust treatment. But as the inn owner and I recounted the true story, Henry's face flushed with anger, a side of him I'd never seen. "You absolute fools," he yelled, his voice echoing through the lobby. "I'm ashamed to share a last name with you two. You're disowned. Leave now." My husband and Marilyn stood there, dumbfounded. "Where are we supposed to go? Another inn?" they asked, bewildered. Henry was unwavering. "You're disowned. Don't make me say it again." With that, he turned to them with disgust and pushed my husband away. Just then, the police arrived. As my husband and Marilyn's faces drained of color, I recounted the entire plot, playing the recorded conversation for the officers. My husband and Marilyn began to cry, but Henry silenced them with a sharp, cutting tone. "Quiet down, you're disturbing the inn," Henry commanded. He turned to the officer. "Please, take them away." "It was just a prank," my husband stammered, trying to justify his actions, but the officer's expression hardened. "A prank? Do you even realize how reckless that was? You put someone's life at risk, your own wife's." The officer admonished them. Though they weren't taken into custody, their faces were pale, shaken by the consequences. "This isn't over," the officer warned. "Bella's decision will influence your future, keep that in mind." With that, they were escorted out, clearly rattled by the experience. Henry lingered. his face showing deep remorse. "I'm so sorry, Bella. I should have noticed sooner. I had no idea about the burden you were carrying." He turned to the inn owner, extending his apologies for the trouble his family had caused. As it turned out, the inn owner was a client of Henry's company. Unaware of this connection, my husband had previously boasted about his job, only adding to his humiliation. Grateful I had foreseen their plan and acted accordingly, I realized that things could have been far worse had I not trusted my instincts. When we returned from the inn, I initiated a divorce and sought a settlement. I hoped this experience would teach my husband and Marilyn to consider the consequences of their actions. In a surprising turn, Henry also divorced Marilyn and severed ties with my husband, insisting he move out. At work, my husband's problematic behavior had been an issue for some time, and he was soon encouraged to resign. His harsh treatment of colleagues had not gone unnoticed, and his career was now a casualty of his own actions. Marilyn, now without a home, turned to her relatives for support, though there were concerns about her spending habits. As she was still in good health, her family suggested she find a part-time job to support herself, wary of her potential impact on their finances. I moved out and began living independently nearby. Henry and I stayed in touch, and he's become a trusted advisor as I navigate this new chapter. When a local business owner heard of my situation, he reached out with a job offer, expressing genuine concern and welcoming me to his team. It turned out to be a renowned company with a strong reputation for employee care, ironically in the same industry my ex-husband had always bragged about, yet significantly larger. I accepted, grateful for the kindness and support. This new workplace was a world apart from the turmoil I'd left behind, full of friendly colleagues and fulfilling work. It felt like a full-circle moment, a chance to rebuild with purpose and positivity. Starting anew has been empowering, and every day brings a fresh sense of possibility as I leave the past behind and embrace a brighter future. As I prepped for my daughter's surprise graduation party, memories of our family's journey flooded my mind. Raising 3 kids alone after the divorce hadn't been easy, but those struggles had bonded us in ways I never expected, making milestones like today all the more meaningful. I hummed a tune, lost in the chaos of party preparations, when the doorbell rang. In that moment, I almost asked my son Anthony to distract whoever was at the door so I could finish up, but when I opened it, I found myself face to face with an uninvited guest. "Hey," he greeted with a casual wave, looking disheveled, like someone who had been living rough. I froze, caught off guard, unable to find the words. "Dad?" The voice cut through my shock, and I turned to see my kids standing behind me, their faces filled with disbelief. My daughter, Karen, immediately rejected Anthony's attempt to greet the man, insisting he wasn't part of our lives anymore. She ushered Anthony back inside, clearly determined to shut the door on the past. Mark, standing there awkwardly, tried to assert himself, claiming he was here to take care of us again. His words felt so out of place, so absurd, that we couldn't help but laugh, but his confusion quickly turned to anger, and he ranted about not being mocked, growing more frustrated by the second. "What's going on out here?" Another voice joined the scene, curious about the commotion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Let me show you what our lives look like now," I said, stepping forward. "I'm Andrea, 35 years old, a stay-at-home mom who also works remotely. Life hasn't gone as I envisioned, but I've built a fulfilling career in engineering advertising, cultivated meaningful relationships, and found happiness in unexpected places. Our mornings are a whirlwind." Anthony, my middle schooler, always asks why I didn't wake him up sooner, while Karen, my high school daughter, does well in school but is shy when it comes to anything romantic. Mark, my husband, who once mentored me at work, is now often absorbed in his phone, leaving me to manage the hectic rhythm of our home. Amid all the ordinary moments and unexpected twists, we find strength in each other and joy in the journey, however unpredictable it may be. When I first met him, Mark seemed earnest, but his lack of attention to detail and failure to come through when it mattered were always evident. Back then, I never thought of him romantically, but his persistence wore me down, and eventually, I found myself at the altar, my first true acknowledgement that I could be persuaded. Recently, Mark's promotion to manager has meant more business trips, and while I'm proud of his success, his vague answers about his return dates and his irritation when I try to offer him comfort have been disheartening. At home, he's glued to his phone, often barely present, and his unpredictable arrivals have become the norm, with him expecting meals to be ready whenever he shows up. I've avoided confronting him about his late nights, unsure of how to address it. Today, as with so many times before, he was vague about his trip, and when I gently asked when he'd be back, his response was explosive. It froze the air between us. I stood there, holding a plate, stunned, apologizing for even asking. He didn't respond, simply walked out, his anger hanging heavy in the room as the door slammed behind him. My attempt to bring up our finances was abruptly cut short, leaving a heavy silence hanging in the air. Karen, sensing the tension, glanced at me, while Anthony's tight grip on his mug betrayed his unease. I tried to defuse the situation, apologizing for adding to Mark's stress, but Karen, ever supportive, quickly reassured me that none of this was my fault. Her hug provided a small, fleeting comfort amidst the storm of emotion swirling inside me. Realizing it was time for the kids to leave, I urged them to get going. Anthony quickly hurried out, muttering something under his breath as he disappeared down the path, kicking up dust in his wake. Karen shot me one last, worried look, meeting my strained, forced smile, the one that could never quite hide the underlying tension. As the door closed behind them, the silence settled over the house like a thick fog, oppressive and cold. The house, now free from the usual morning chaos, felt hollow, its emptiness echoing the sting of Mark's angry exit. The weight of his harsh words lingered, a painful reminder of the widening gap between us. In these moments, I've learned to shove aside the negative emotions and push forward, even if it means talking myself into staying motivated. With Mark no longer contributing financially, the responsibility falls on me to ensure our children have everything they need. I've taken on a career as a graphic designer, knowing the income is unpredictable, but determined to make it work. Every day I remind myself to stay strong, even as I fold laundry, marveling at the single cloud in the sky, humming songs from my youth to keep my spirits lifted. Mark's business trips have become routine, and his late-night returns are now so rare they're almost mythical. When I've tried to gently inquire about his late hours, his responses are dismissive, shutting down any further conversation. His communication has dwindled to brief, cold exchanges, so different from the partner I once knew. When he walks away, leaving nothing but a chill in his wake, I'm momentarily stunned, but I quickly pull myself together. My focus now shifts to securing our financial future. I can't rely on Mark for anything anymore. I've carefully organized our finances into 4 accounts, one for my income and daily expenses, another for the mortgage, and a third set aside for emergencies. While the first account is stable for now, the thought of the looming mortgage payments fills me with dread. I push the anxiety aside, choosing instead to focus on the tasks at hand. But when I check the emergency account, I find an unexpected withdrawal, one that sends a wave of unease through me. My heart races. This is something my kids don't know about. Could this be fraud? But the withdrawal pattern doesn't match the usual signs of a scam, making the situation even more unsettling. A creeping suspicion starts to form, one I can't quite shake off. As I wrestle with this new financial mystery, I also feel the toll these stresses are taking on me, my failing eyesight, the fine lines that mark the passage of time, the remnants of sleepless nights spent working at my desk. Still, I refuse to be harsh on myself. I face the situation head-on, determined to resolve the financial anomaly, and prepare for whatever challenges come next. Whether or not Mark is part of that future, my resolve to protect and provide for my family is unshaken. The idea of Mark returning home while the sun is still up feels like a distant dream, as impossible as the chance of a sudden hailstorm tomorrow. As I stand by the grill, watching the chicken sizzle, I brace myself for the inevitable critique he'll offer at dinner, his discontent with the meal, which will probably lack some imagined excitement. Cooking used to offer me a brief escape from the daily grind, but now, it's overshadowed by a sense of impending dread. I've been stewing over how to confront Mark about the mysterious withdrawal from our emergency fund. With the kids usually locked away in their rooms until dinner, I thought tonight might be the right moment to bring it up, but finding the right words feels daunting. Just as I'm about to gather the courage, Mark excuses himself to the bathroom, leaving me torn between relief at avoiding the confrontation and frustration at missing the opportunity. Then, I notice his phone left behind on the table, buzzing with a notification from a name I don't recognize. The temptation to peek is overwhelming, especially knowing he'll be gone for a while. My heart races as I edge closer to the table, glancing at the screen. Just as I get a fleeting look, I hear footsteps approaching. I hurriedly return the phone to its place as Anthony walks into the room, asking about dinner. I assure him it'll be ready soon, my mind racing as I consider the possibility that tonight's dinner complaints might go beyond the food. When the house quiets and everyone falls asleep, I can't shake the urge to investigate further. Driven by a mix of duty and curiosity, I quietly slip out of my room, determined to uncover the truth. Mark's deep, steady snoring tells me he's out cold, likely helped by the beer I encouraged him to drink with dinner. The hallway is dimly lit as I make my way to his room, the air thick with the lingering smell of alcohol. I push past the discomfort, refusing to let the stench stop me. I reach his bedside, determined to get the answers I need. I stared at Mark's phone, its cable a silent tether to the outlet, a lifeline that I knew I had to sever to find the answers I needed. Unplugging it would light up the screen, possibly revealing more than I was prepared to confront. But the need to know, to understand the betrayal that had been gnawing at me, urged my trembling hands into action. With my heart heavy and my hands unsteady, I carefully unplugged the phone, pressing it against my chest to keep the screen dark. I tiptoed back to my room. The soft sobs I hadn't realized were building spilling over, and I wiped them away hastily with the sleeve of my pajamas. Once inside my sanctuary, I turned on the phone, my chest tight as I unlocked it and searched for the messages that had been haunting me. The conversation with Bruce was worse than I could have imagined. There were plans for future trips, casual mentions of using my savings, betrayals that sliced through me with a pain I hadn't anticipated. As I read through their exchange, a chilling calm settled over me, a quiet realization that the betrayals went far deeper than I had ever guessed. Photographs, secret plans, stolen moments. My earlier worries seemed almost naive now. I returned the phone to its charger beside Mark, moving silently, deliberately, trying not to disturb the sleep that masked the truth of the man beside me. The next morning, I moved through the motions of preparing breakfast with an eerie smoothness, my movements mechanical. Mark appeared, looking disheveled, oblivious to the storm that was brewing in my heart. His casual greeting met my cold, steely response, far from the warmth of the morning sun. When he asked about breakfast, I didn't answer with food but with the harsh reality of his actions and the existence of Bruce. The moment he realized I knew, disbelief flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by anger. It escalated so quickly that, before I could catch my breath, he threw a plate across the room. It shattered behind me, the sound of final punctuation to the death of any civility between us. My children, caught in the chaos, watched in stunned silence. Karen, ever the quick thinker, recorded the confrontation, her presence a reminder that she was ready to protect me. Anthony, his hand gripping a baseball bat, stood alert but silent, embodying the tension in the air. I tried to calm them, urging caution, knowing their safety was my primary concern. The rest of the day was a blur of overwhelming emotions, and the weight of it all led to a professional setback. I had to ask for an extension for the first time in my career. When Mark returned later that day, his actions were shockingly cold. He placed divorce papers on the table without a hint of warmth, his words final, stripping away the last remnants of affection. Yet, in the midst of the storm, the unwavering support of my children gave me some semblance of peace. Their readiness to stand by me and protect me in that moment was a small but vital comfort in the face of such profound betrayal. Deciding to divorce felt like stepping into uncharted waters. I was overwhelmed, unsure if I could handle the financial burden alone. But when I shared my fears with Karen and Anthony, we found strength in each other's resolve. Karen offered to contribute her earnings from her part-time job, and Anthony volunteered to take on more household responsibilities. Accepting their help was difficult, but it was our way forward, together. 2 weeks after that heart-to-heart conversation, Mark's absence in our home brought a surprising sense of relief. My worries didn't vanish, but the atmosphere lightened. The weight of his presence had been suffocating, and with him gone, it felt like we could breathe again. With legal advice, we finalized the divorce. It was hard, but stepping into a new chapter with my children felt strangely hopeful, despite the challenges ahead. 2 years later, the journey had been far from easy. Karen balanced her studies with work, a sacrifice that, despite my protests, kept us afloat. When her exam results didn't meet our expectations, guilt weighed heavily on me, but Karen, with a maturity beyond her years, stood firm and owned her decisions. Anthony, too, became a steadying presence, managing the household chores and lightening my load, even if it meant the occasional squabble over laundry. Reflecting on these 2 years, it was clear that life after divorce had tested us in ways we hadn't anticipated. Yet, despite the hardships, we had weathered the storm together. And now, as I prepared a special dinner to celebrate Karen's acceptance into medical school, my heart swelled with pride and gratitude. This dinner wasn't just a celebration of her academic achievement, it was a tribute to the strength, resilience, and unwavering support we'd given each other through it all. Together, we had built something stronger from the ashes of our past. As I was finishing up preparations for our small party, the last thing I expected was Mark's sudden appearance at the door. His disheveled look and mismatched clothes took me by surprise, and I could feel the tension in the air as my children reacted. Their mix of rejection and shock was palpable, a clear sign of how far removed he had become from our lives. Mark, trying to reinsert himself into the fold, was met with disbelief and even laughter from us. His attempts to act as though nothing had changed felt absurd. His presence, jarring and unwelcome, served as a stark reminder of the path we'd been forced to walk since our separation. But as I looked at my children, standing by me with unwavering support, I realized that the true strength of our family didn't lie in the absence of struggles, it was in how we faced them together, united. Gathering my composure, I stood up and introduced Mark to Frank, my husband. I hadn't spoken much about Mark to Frank, so the introduction was awkward, filled with tension as everyone silently gauged the situation. Frank, ever polite, offered a cordial smile, but the familiarity in his voice revealed his role as the president of the company where Mark was employed. Mark, however, feigned ignorance, and the moment became increasingly uncomfortable. Frank, with pointed remarks, subtly highlighted Mark's recent professional failures, which Mark denied with defensive accusations of infidelity. I calmly corrected him, our divorce was final, and his claims were baseless. But the real revelation came when I confronted him with the proof of his financial betrayal. I showed him the unauthorized withdrawal from our emergency fund, money that had been meant for my children's future, not for his reckless spending. It was a significant sum, $50,000 of my late parents' inheritance, and Mark's actions bordered on criminal, with potential charges of forgery looming. Cornered, Mark had no choice but to agree to a settlement. He would return the stolen funds and commit to alimony payments. Later, as Frank and I sat down with coffee, I found myself reflecting on what had just transpired. The alimony payments weighed heavily on my mind, not only because of the financial burden they represented but also because of the impact on Mark. His misconduct had cost him everything: his job, his financial stability, and his sense of pride. Now, struggling to make ends meet with multiple low-paying jobs, his life seemed to be in freefall. Frank's decision to sever professional ties with Mark's former employer seemed extreme at first, but Frank was firm in his belief that integrity, both in business and personal matters, must come first. It was a stance that made me realize just how far removed from those values Mark had become. Despite the sense of vindication, I couldn't shake the feeling that life had a way of turning the tables in harsh and unexpected ways. As we discussed Mark's downfall, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Mark's life had crumbled, his downfall punctuated by the loss of a major client and his job, leaving him struggling under the weight of the debts he'd accumulated. He'd been left to pick up the pieces of a failed relationship with Bruce, who had run up debts that Mark, as the guarantor, was now responsible for. Even as I listened to his sarcastic remarks about our children, Karen's success in medical school, and Anthony's newfound passion for law, I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He wasn't the man I once knew, but he was still the father of my children, and I couldn't fully dismiss that bond. When Mark casually offered to pay his share of the bill, I didn't hesitate. I handled it swiftly, not allowing any room for debate. Our brief encounter ended with polite words and a quiet departure. As Frank and I left, I couldn't help but think about the upcoming doctor's appointment and the news I was eager to share with my children. Frank and I were expecting. The reaction from Karen and Anthony was a blend of shock, concern, and eventual support. They, too, had grown over the years, and their readiness to accept the new chapter in our lives filled me with warmth. Frank suggested I take a break from freelancing during the pregnancy, but I was determined to keep working. A compromise was reached, and we moved forward, as always, with a shared sense of understanding. On my way to the doctor, I passed a joyful family enjoying the sunshine, and I paused for a moment to reflect on my own happiness. After everything we had been through, a quiet sense of contentment washed over me. The road had been long and filled with unexpected turns, but it was these moments of love, resilience, and new beginnings that made everything worthwhile. Together, we had weathered the storms, and now, with Frank and our growing family, I was filled with hope for the future. A recent event left me reeling with shock and disbelief. My mother-in-law, in an unexpected and cruel act, took my passport and deliberately set it on fire. It ignited quickly, crumbling to ashes in mere seconds. The fire consumed it so fast. My dream vacation to St. B's Island was abruptly shattered. I could only stand there, stunned, as she coolly told me that, since I was a stranger to her, I wouldn't be traveling anywhere. I would be staying home with her. My husband, standing nearby, simply grinned in silent complicity. Their treachery stung, though I should have known better. Still, the coldness with which they executed their plan caught me off guard. They seemed to take some twisted pleasure in their actions, sharing a laugh over their perceived victory. Frustrated and desperate to reclaim my dignity, I reminded them of who I was. My name is Kayla. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a linguist. I teach and research languages at the university. My work takes me abroad often, as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge through an organization I run. My job demands frequent travel, sometimes keeping me away for months. Before all this, I never imagined myself married. But then, when I was 25, I returned home and met Peter, who would eventually become my husband. Despite my career's challenges, Peter and I made it work. Our relationship has always been maintained through constant calls and emails. We married when I was 27, and though our marriage means long separations, he's always supported me. Now, after 6 long months, I was returning home. Despite the exhausting flight and the traumatic events with my passport, a rush of excitement surged through me. I couldn't wait to be in Peter's arms again, to finally put this whole ordeal behind me and restore the peace between us. When I arrived, however, Peter wasn't home yet. I began tidying up, something I always did despite his reminders to keep things neat. Normally, I'd be irritated at the clutter, but today, I let it slide. I was just too happy to be home. Then, I heard the door. It was Peter. My heart leaped as I rushed to greet him. Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you. But his response was flat, almost indifferent. Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back? I froze, stunned by his lack of enthusiasm. After 6 months apart, was that all he had to say? My voice trembled with frustration. We haven't seen each other in 6 months. Peter, aren't you going to say you missed me? He shrugged, as if the reunion wasn't something worth celebrating. We've been doing this for a while. I guess I'm just used to it. I'm really tired. The pain was unmistakable. Is dinner ready? He asked, almost dismissively. Yes, it's ready. Let's eat. I tried to focus on the meal, hoping for some warmth in our time together, but Peter's attention was split, his eyes glued to his phone. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone? I asked, my voice edged with irritation. There's nothing wrong, he muttered without looking up. But we've been apart for months, I continued. We've kept in touch through calls and emails. There's nothing new to discuss. Doesn't this moment, being together again, mean anything to you? My voice grew sharper with each word, and I could see it annoyed him. He slammed his phone down on the table, his eyes flashing with irritation. You just got off a plane, he snapped, but I'm exhausted from work. I bit back a retort but couldn't help myself. I also came straight here after work. Peter, don't talk to me like that. I didn't ask you to rush, he shot back coldly. You chose to come home immediately. His words stung, and I could feel the space between us growing. You don't have to say it like that. I missed you, despite everything. There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. The reunion I had envisioned, a joyful moment of reconnection, was slipping through my fingers. Peter's response was colder than I ever expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't have come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla. In a fit of frustration, he slammed his hand on the table and stormed out, leaving his dinner untouched. I sat there alone, stunned and confused. Why was he acting so distant, so unfeeling? I had been looking forward to this moment for so long, only to have it turn into something so painfully empty. What was the point of coming home early if all it did was lead to this disappointment? Tears welled in my eyes as I stared at the untouched meal, the once welcome thought of reunion now tainted by a cold, sinking feeling. The next morning, the atmosphere between Peter and me remained thick with unresolved tension. I greeted him with a tentative, good morning, but he shot me a frosty look and responded bitterly, I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working. His words hit me like a slap. I knew they weren't true, and I immediately corrected him. That's not accurate, Peter. I work too, summarizing our activities, preparing for training sessions. It's more work than you think. But he dismissed my efforts with a wave. Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. You enjoy your time at home, princess. The sarcasm in his voice was sharp, and I watched him leave without another word. It wasn't the first time we'd argued, but the cruel tone he used left me stunned. The distance between us was growing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in our relationship. Trying to clear my mind, I turned to housework, vacuuming the living room and changing the linens. But as I worked, my phone rang, interrupting the quiet. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother-in-law. My stomach churned with unease as I answered. Hello, Kayla Hede. Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday. Yes, that's right, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. And I also heard you upset Peter. He was quite angry, she added. Her words only deepened my confusion. What had I done wrong, and how could I fix it? Then, her suggestion took me by surprise. Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip? She said. Before I could process her words, she continued. I was talking to my husband about going to St. Bert's Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You used to travel a lot, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements? I felt an unease ripple through me. Her offer wasn't just a suggestion, it was a thinly veiled request. It was clear from her tone that she didn't genuinely want to travel with me, but instead, she saw an opportunity to use my experience. My relationship with her had always been strained. She'd never hidden her disdain for me, not since we first met at our wedding reception. Her comments had often been biting, and over the years, they hadn't softened. When I was abroad, she would send me messages like, how can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you can't manage the house, maybe my son should have married someone else. It was a mistake letting him marry you. Her attitude left me wary of any interaction with her, and this proposal felt like another attempt to manipulate me for her own convenience. But try as I might, I couldn't find the strength to turn her down, even though I knew I was being used. A few hours later, Peter returned home from work, his mood noticeably lighter than it had been that morning. Dropping his briefcase onto the sofa, he gave me a wide, almost eager smile. Mom called, didn't she? we're going on that trip to St. Yeah, I heard, I replied cautiously, my heart tightening in my chest. He pressed, but you're not going to turn it down, right? Mom really wants you to come with us. His enthusiasm made it even harder to voice my reservations. I knew he wanted me to be involved, but the whole situation felt uncomfortable. How could I navigate this without making things worse or feeling even more manipulated? When I hesitated, he didn't let it slide. Come on, why don't you just go with Mom and Dad as you originally planned? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Why don't you just go with them, Peter? His expression immediately hardened. He clicked his tongue, and his voice dropped into a more threatening tone. You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling. The sting of his words caught me off guard. You don't have to speak like that, I protested, my voice shaking. It's true, isn't it? He shot back, undeterred. Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings. Everything should be in my name, as you probably know. But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip, right? I asked, hoping to clarify the financial arrangement. He scoffed. What are you talking about? We'll split it 50-50ths. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents, he added, as though my objection was disrespectful. And what is that supposed to mean? I asked, feeling my frustration rise. If you've got all the time to lounge around at home, why don't you just make the reservations yourself? Make the reservations now, he demanded coldly. You've got the time. My hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding. This isn't right, I muttered, barely able to contain my anger. I don't want to, I murmured, my voice barely audible. What did you say? Peter scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one go. His dismissive attitude stung, but I didn't have the energy to argue. Despite the unfairness of the situation and the turmoil churning inside me, I felt cornered, humiliated, and powerless. I had no choice but to comply. Reluctantly, I began making all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to St. Bert's Island, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. The day of the trip finally arrived. I was supposed to pick them up from my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport, but in the days leading up to our departure, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I found myself lying awake late one night, unable to sleep. When I realized Peter wasn't next to me, I got up and walked to the living room, where I overheard him on the phone. It's fine, Mom, I'll be there first thing in the morning. Just take care of the passport issue. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you, he said into the receiver. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted in confusion. What was supposed to be a simple family trip was now laced with secrecy and hidden agendas. I stood there in the dark, unsure of how to confront what I had just heard. Peter had mentioned a passport and someone he was going to introduce to his mother. The pieces didn't fit. I knew something was happening behind my back, but I couldn't put it together. The dread gnawed at me, and I resolved to stay alert. The next day, I went through the motions of packing, making sure everything was in order, both my things and Peter's. With everything packed, we drove to my in-laws' house. As we pulled up, I could feel the tension building. I had no idea what was waiting for me, but I was ready to face it head-on. We were greeted only by my mother-in-law. Oh, hi, Kayla, good to see you. We're almost ready, just need a few more things, she said in her usual casual tone, though there was an urgency in her voice that immediately set me on edge. Okay, take your time, I replied, my unease growing. Oh, and Kayla, could you grab the carry-on from the other room? It's heavy, so make sure to get Peter to help you, she added, her eyes flicking briefly to Peter. I noticed the subtle exchange of glances between them and instinctively, my hand went to my pocket to check that my passport was still safely there. Something about the situation didn't feel right. I returned to the living room, carrying the heavy bag, and found my mother-in-law standing there with a malicious grin on her face. In her hand, to my horror, was my passport. You're not going on this trip, Kayla, she said, the words dripping with satisfaction. What do you mean? I'm going, I said, disbelief creeping into my voice as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She shrugged, not even trying to hide the coldness in her eyes. I was just using you to handle the arrangements. You're a stranger here, you'll stay behind. Her words hit me like a slap. Betrayal, manipulation, all of it was worse than I had imagined. I wasn't just an outsider in their plans, I was a pawn, discarded as soon as I had outlived my usefulness. The depth of their deceit shocked me, leaving me frozen in place, unsure of how to respond. Without another word, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen. A flicker of flame caught my eye as she lit a lighter and set my passport on fire in the sink. The paper curled and blackened, quickly reduced to ashes as I watched in stunned silence. We did it, she exclaimed triumphantly, as if she had just won a great victory. Peter, who had been standing silently nearby, joined her with an enthusiastic cheer. Yeah, Mom, we did it. No, I screamed, my voice breaking. This is just the three of you, right? You'll introduce me to Peter's new girlfriend when you get back. Yeah, I've already set that up, my mother-in-law said dismissively. We don't need you anymore. I stood there, feeling the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. My father-in-law stepped forward then, his expression cold. He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of himself with another woman, looking smug. I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but when we get back from this trip, I'll be living with her. You can leave when we return. His words were like a knife to the heart. My mother-in-law laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in my ears. Their faces were full of malice, and in that moment, I realized I no longer had a place in this family. I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil within me. By the way, whose passport is that? I asked, my voice trembling. What are you talking about? My mother-in-law replied, her tone flat. It's yours. I took it out of your handbag. I pulled my actual passport from my pocket and held it up, my hands shaking. My passport is right here, I said, the realization dawning on me. What? No, it can't be, my mother-in-law stammered, her confident facade crumbling in an instant. I held up my passport, still intact and unscathed. It's mine, see for yourself, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. Her face drained of color as the truth began to sink in. That's not possible, she muttered, her voice trembling, as if trying to convince herself more than me. It was clear now, she had assumed she had taken my passport from my handbag, but in her haste, she hadn't bothered to double-check before setting it alight. Her malicious plans had backfired spectacularly. Whose passport did I burn, then? She asked, her voice quaking with a mix of panic and confusion. I think it was your son's passport, I replied, my words cold but filled with the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. You burned my son's passport? She gasped, horrified, her hands shaking as she stared at me in disbelief. The weight of her mistake hit her all at once. She had set in motion a series of disastrous events that would unravel everything. The already fractured family dynamic now lay in tatters, with her rash actions exposing all the hidden schemes beneath the surface. Chaos erupted in the room. My husband, his face flushed with anger, whipped around to face her. What the hell have you done? I told you to be careful. There was only one passport in her bag. Who would have thought it was mine? I don't care. You didn't check properly. And now look what's happened, she shot back, her voice rising defensively. The tension between them boiled over. Their blame game escalated as the weight of the situation pressed down on all of us. In the midst of their shouting match, Peter turned to me. Hey, Kayla, do something. But I was done being dragged into their mess. Seriously? Who the hell do you think you are, telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back, and now you're playing the victim? You and your mother are both despicable, I shot back, my anger boiling over. Watch your tone, Peter snarled, stepping closer. I'll speak however I want. You and your terrible mother have ruined everything. Don't think I'm going to let this slide. You're going to pay for everything, your affair, all the horrible things your mother said to me. Just wait, I said, my resolve hardening with each word. The shouting was interrupted by the appearance of my father-in-law, who stormed into the room, drawn by the noise. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his voice sharp with authority. I recounted the whole story, from the passport mix-up to the affair, laying it all bare. His face twisted in fury as he processed everything. The trip to St. Bert's Island was immediately cancelled, and the fallout was swift and severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce, and my husband was disowned by his father, banned from returning home. I didn't waste any time. I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce. I also demanded alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, paid in one lump sum, along with compensation for the cancelled trip to St. Nevis Island. They were financially unprepared and had to borrow money to meet my demands. In the end, Peter, now living with his mother, found himself in dire financial straits. The woman he had cheated with also left him, abandoning him just as quickly as he had abandoned me. As for me, I took control of my future. With the alimony money, I moved into a condo, embracing my newfound independence. Though it wasn't easy, I grew stronger through the challenges. I began to love my life again, focusing on my travels, immersing myself in new cultures, and sharing my journey with the world. Free from betrayal and mistreatment, I was finally on my own path to happiness. Hi, my name is Alexis, and I'm 33. Recently, I emerged from one of the most challenging periods of my life, and I'm here to share that journey with you. My story begins with my former husband, Russell, and his mother, Lori. Russell and I met in college and felt an instant connection, which soon blossomed into a relationship. After 5.5 years together, we got married. Our bond was strong, but from the start, Lori cast a shadow over it. She made it clear she didn't approve of me and rarely missed an opportunity to criticize or insult me. Her remarks hit especially hard because of my insecurities about my appearance. But I found comfort in believing that Russell loved me for who I truly was. 3 years into our marriage, I left my job to start a business with my best friend. It was a bold decision, but Russell supported it fully. The venture started slowly, yet it eventually became very successful, allowing us to live comfortably. However, even with this success, Lori's attitude toward me remained the same. She ignored my accomplishments and even accused me of trying to undermine her son. Russell's silence during her insults added strain to our relationship and sparked frequent arguments. I felt he never stood up for me, which created a growing rift between us. Things took a dark turn when I discovered that Lori was trying to set Russell up with other women. I stumbled across a text conversation on Russell's phone filled with disparaging remarks about me. Initially, Russell resisted his mother's meddling, but over time, he began to show interest in the women she introduced him to. Hurt and shaken, I planned to confront him about it the next day. But that day, something unexpected happened. On my way to work, I was in a car accident. One moment I was on the road, and the next, I awoke in a hospital bed to the sounds of machines and the concerned faces of nurses. My head pounded, and I felt an overwhelming thirst. I asked for water, then drifted back into a restless sleep, hoping the pain would subside. When I tried to shift my legs for comfort, I realized with horror that they wouldn't move. Panic set in as I frantically called for a nurse and explained my inability to feel my legs. The doctor ran some tests and later delivered devastating news: I was paralyzed. Russell, who had entered the room briefly, left soon after, likely overwhelmed. Alone, I struggled to process this life-altering reality. The doctor, sensing my distress, reassured me that there was still a chance for recovery, though it would be a slow and demanding journey. That faint glimmer of hope offered me something to hold on to amid the despair. Determined to recover, I listened carefully as the doctor emphasized the importance of nutrition, rest, and physical therapy. Shortly afterward, the nurses filled me in on the details of the accident. I'd been hit at an intersection by a driver under the influence, which caused severe injuries, including spinal cord damage, a broken collarbone, and facial bruises. I was shocked to learn I'd been in a coma for 2 weeks. Knowing that the driver had been caught brought a small sense of justice, though it didn't lessen the pain or frustration I felt. After eating and taking medication, I fell into a deep sleep. When I awoke, the room was quiet, and I noticed my mom resting in a nearby chair. Startling her awake, we shared an emotional reunion, filled with tears and relief. Her presence was a huge comfort, a reminder of the support I had in facing my recovery. Holding her hand, I asked how she was coping. Despite knowing the worry she felt for me, she smiled, motherly as ever, hiding her pain for my sake. Yet her voice revealed the depth of her fear and concern. I tried to reassure her, though I could feel the weight of her words and her helplessness over the situation. Our conversation shifted to my recovery, and we clung to hope, even in the face of uncertainty. My mom's support was unwavering, her love a beacon of strength. However, Russell's absence since the accident, especially after learning about my paralysis, left a painful void. My mom, just as confused and concerned, promised to reach out to him, her protective instincts kicking in. As sleep started to overtake me, a heavy ache of loss and betrayal settled over me. Russell's brief appearance before the diagnosis and his sudden disappearance afterward left a deep question in my mind: was he really there for me when it mattered most? When I awoke, the sight that greeted me was my mother, her face tense as she spoke sharply into the phone. Her words were clipped and demanding, and though I could barely make out the conversation, I knew she was deeply upset. My head throbbed as the pain meds had worn off, so I quickly called a nurse to help ease the discomfort. Once the fresh dose began to dull the ache, my curiosity got the best of me, and I asked who my mother was speaking to with such fury. At first, she brushed off my question, but I could see the frustration and worry etched in her face. After a bit of coaxing, she revealed that she'd been arguing with Russell, who had been spending most of his time out with friends. My stomach dropped as I realized that, during the 2 weeks I'd been comatose, he'd barely visited me. That knowledge hit harder than any physical pain I'd endured, adding an emotional weight I hadn't anticipated. My mother had finally lost her patience with him. Confronting him for his apparent indifference toward my accident and the trauma I was facing, she had demanded he come to see me within the hour, letting him know that his behavior was unacceptable. She set down an ultimatum, firm and resolute, refusing to let his absence hurt me further. I found the situation both humiliating and, unfortunately, necessary. Russell eventually showed up, accompanied by Lori, which only added to my discomfort. The weight of his absence had already stung deeply, but seeing Lori there felt like a final insult. Sensing the tension, my mom excused herself to give us some privacy. When I confronted Russell about his neglect, Lori was quick to respond, coldly implying that I was now useless to him. She revealed that, while Russell had initially considered staying, she had persuaded him otherwise, citing our prior marital struggles and my inability to contribute financially due to my paralysis as justifications for abandoning our relationship. This revelation was like a blow to the gut, exposing the fragility of our bond and forcing me to confront the harsh reality of my new circumstances. Russell confirmed, in painful clarity, that my paralysis had changed his commitment to the vows we'd once made, to support each other in sickness and in health. His admission, so clearly influenced by Lori's contempt, left me reeling. Lori didn't hesitate to assert that Russell deserved better, reducing my worth to what she saw as my dwindling financial success. Together, they had decided to leave me when I needed them most. Russell announced he would be filing for divorce, and Lori, almost gleeful, had already arranged a date for him shortly after. Their betrayal felt surreal. As they left, leaving me to process the enormity of their abandonment, my mom returned. Her presence was a much-needed comfort as I shared the details of our devastating exchange. Fury filled her eyes. She couldn't have confronted them in time, but her anger radiated as she held me close, a pillar of strength as I cried until sleep finally provided an escape. The arrival of the divorce papers the next day was a painful formality. Signing them, I couldn't help but notice Lori's smug satisfaction and Russell's evident relief, painful reminders of how I had been abandoned at my most vulnerable. The weeks that followed were dark. Depression clung to me, making each day feel gray and lifeless, but my mom was my silent rock, offering comfort through thoughtful gestures, my favorite meals, fresh flowers, small acts that spoke volumes. Her presence was a reminder that, despite my losses, I still had someone who loved me unconditionally. Gradually, her support helped me face each day, even as I began the long process of physical healing and prepared for the journey ahead. Soon after my diagnosis and Russell's departure, I was cleared to begin physical therapy, along with a regimen of medications for managing my paralysis. A skilled physical therapist had been recommended, with sessions starting in a week. I felt defeated and had no motivation to begin, spending days in bed, overwhelmed by sadness. I even missed my first couple of therapy appointments, surrendering to despair, but my mom reached her breaking point, confronting me. She made it clear that she could no longer watch me wallow. When I insisted that I felt defeated, she argued that I had the power to change my situation, at least a little, even a small step, she insisted, was better than remaining in misery. Her words struck a nerve, especially her suggestion that I could still reclaim some control over my life, and, perhaps, even prove Russell and Lori wrong. She reminded me that, while my physical abilities had changed, my mind and spirit were still intact, urging me to channel those strengths. Reluctantly, I agreed to work from home, partly to appease her and partly to distract myself from her unyielding encouragement. To my surprise, this decision became a turning point. I resumed my role in my business, thanks largely to my best friend and business partner, who had kept things running during my absence. Her visits, though infrequent due to her own responsibilities, reminded me of the world outside my isolation. This choice, to begin working again, marked the first step in a long journey of recovery and self-reclamation. My mom's unwavering support and the realization that succumbing to despair would only deepen my pain pushed me forward. Little by little, I found my strength again, knowing that this new path, though difficult, was mine to reclaim. After returning to work and easing the burden on my business partner, I was met with a warm welcome from the team. There was concern in their eyes, but also a clear sense of relief that I was back in action. I reassured them that I was doing well, and before long, I found myself falling back into the rhythm of work. My mom was delighted by this positive shift, knowing how important it was for my recovery. This newfound focus was also reflected in my commitment to physical therapy, where I attended sessions 4 times a week. It was difficult and at times embarrassing, but I was determined to push through. Then, something unexpected reignited my drive, a Facebook post by Russell announcing his remarriage. The post, thinly veiled with a jab at our past, struck a deep chord within me. That moment of anger became the catalyst for a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about recovering anymore. It was about thriving, about surpassing my past achievements. The next 5 years became a relentless pursuit of success. The first 3 were dedicated to reclaiming my ability to walk. I succeeded, using a cane as my companion, but walking on my own again felt like a monumental victory. The subsequent years were focused on growing my business, pushing it to new heights and earning recognition. Each step was a testament to my strength, my resilience, and my refusal to be defined by what had happened to me. Despite my accomplishments, satisfaction still eluded me until a twist of fate gave me an opportunity for retribution. Russell's company had hit a rough patch, and mine was thriving. We were in a position to offer a merger, one that would place us in a dominant position. We negotiated the terms, ensuring that we would hold the power. When the day came for the first post-merger meeting, I walked into Russell's company, cane in hand, but standing tall. The look of shock on his face as he saw me was a quiet, but powerful victory. The pain, the betrayal, the years of hard work, they had led to this moment. This was more than just a personal triumph. It marked a new chapter, not just in my life, but in my career. With confidence in my stride, I made my entrance, the click of my heels echoing through the room. I was no longer the woman Russell had left behind. I was the embodiment of my recovery. I introduced myself as the new CEO, outlining changes to come, including a leaner organizational structure. The message was clear, especially to Russell. He was a prime candidate for dismissal. After the meeting, he confronted me, disbelief written all over his face. He accused me of deceit, of hiding my recovery from him. I calmly explained that his absence had kept him in the dark about the full extent of my recovery, a recovery that had far surpassed his expectations. His suggestion that revenge was my motive was met with indifference. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving my worth, about showing that my recovery and success were not anchored in the past but were about the future I was building. His plea for professionalism, framed around the impending arrival of his child, struck a chord. It was ironic, considering the same reasons he once used to undermine our relationship were now his justification for needing stability. But the irony didn't change my decision. I informed him that his termination letter was already prepared. His reaction, a mix of shock and indignation, mirrored the abandonment I had felt when I needed him most. As I walked away, leaving him to absorb the consequences of his actions, I felt a surge of empowerment, a stark contrast to the vulnerability I once felt. Later, Lori's desperate attempts to vilify me with calls and messages only reinforced the righteousness of my actions. I reminded her of her role in the unraveling of my marriage and my well-being, and her insults bounced off me. The exchange, though bitter, was a clear reflection of how far I had come, from a place of helplessness to a position of strength. The victory wasn't just in the retribution, it was. At last, the dream of building a new, spacious home was finally becoming a reality, and I was filled with excitement, eager to start this new chapter in our lives. But just as we were about to celebrate, an unexpected twist threw me off course. My in-laws appeared at our doorstep, unannounced. With a firm tone, they declared, "We're moving in," and added that my parents needed to leave. I froze, completely caught off guard, and turned to my husband for support. He let out a long breath and said softly, "Please, just do as they ask, gently let your parents know." As I watched my in-laws eagerly unpacking, turning what was supposed to be our new home into their own, I felt a surge of disbelief and frustration. "Do you realize this is our house?" I asked, hoping they might understand the gravity of the situation. "I'm Tiffany, 32, and married to my wonderful husband, Jesse, for 4 years. We've built a life filled with love and mutual support, though we don't have children yet. Recently, however, I've become more concerned about my aging parents, whose declining mobility has been weighing on me. I suggested to Jesse that we move in with them to provide the care they need." Without hesitation, he agreed. "It's a win-win," he said. "We support them, and it gives us peace of mind." I couldn't have been more grateful for his understanding. We started discussing this idea, but soon realized the logistics were a challenge. My parents live far outside the city, and with neither of us driving, commuting would be tough. Moving them to our cramped city apartment wasn't an option either. It was already too small for just the two of us, let alone more people. And with the possibility of children in the future, the space issue would only grow. After a lot of thought, I proposed a bold idea. Why not build a new home that could comfortably accommodate everyone? Jesse's face lit up. "That's an amazing idea," he exclaimed, and we began planning our dream home. When I shared the idea with my parents, they initially felt guilty about the potential disruption, but once I explained the reasoning behind it, their hesitation melted away, and excitement took over. That was a huge relief. Later, Jesse and I visited a real estate agency to finalize the details. We focused on finding a location near hospitals for my parents' convenience and close to train stations for easier commuting. Throughout the planning stages, I sensed some reluctance from my parents about the idea of living with us. Thankfully, Jesse stepped in with thoughtful suggestions that helped smooth over their concerns. As we progressed, the vision of our new home started to take shape, and the excitement became palpable. After extensive research and discussions, we finally had our plans ready to move forward. "We're almost there," I said, acknowledging how complex the process was. "Balancing all this with work certainly slows things down," Jesse added, but both of us were thrilled with the outcome so far. The blueprint we had worked so hard to create was beyond what we'd imagined. After consulting real estate agents and gathering information, we were finally ready to move forward with the builders. Now, we just had to wait for our dream home to be built, a long process, but one we eagerly anticipated. However, as our project progressed, my in-laws began to show an increasing interest. "Dear, we heard you're building a new house, is that true?" they asked one day, Yes, that's right. We're hoping to finish by the end of the year, I replied. How wonderful. We're so impressed with how Jesse's been handling everything and keeping us in the loop, they said, their tone warm and complimentary. At first, their enthusiasm seemed genuine, but little did I know how this would all unfold. When my mother-in-law suddenly expressed an eagerness to visit us soon, I was taken aback but agreed, excited about the opportunity to catch up. That weekend, my husband and I set out for a trip to their place. They greeted us warmly, and the conversation quickly turned to our new home project. Building a new house is such an exciting time, isn't it? My father-in-law remarked, his tone nostalgic, as though reflecting on his own experiences. Yes, we're thrilled, I replied. We just hope everything goes smoothly so we can move in as soon as possible. We all shared a laugh, looking forward to the exciting journey ahead. Curious, my mother-in-law asked, can we see the blueprints? My husband pulled out his phone and showed them a photo of the design. Oh, it's so spacious, she observed, and so many rooms. Yes, we're planning to live with my parents, so we needed the extra space, I explained, trying to keep it casual. Both in-laws exchanged a surprised glance. You're all moving in together? They asked in unison. Yes, my husband replied. My parents are getting older, so we decided it would be best for all of us to live together, which led to building this house. Their expressions shifted subtly, and I noticed a hint of discomfort in their voices. Really? I see, they said, their tone now more measured. Feeling the tension rise, I quickly changed the subject. How have you two been? How's your health? We're doing well, no major changes, just the usual, they replied, but I could tell the curiosity about our plans hadn't quite left. Tell us more about the new house, they pressed. Which room will your parents use? As my husband pointed to the blueprint and explained, I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. He didn't seem to notice, but I could see their faces tightening as they processed the information. Despite their discomfort, we continued discussing the layout, hoping our shared excitement about the new home would ease their concerns. As the construction of the house moved forward, I couldn't help but worry that my in-laws might feel overlooked or that we were favoring my parents. Though I felt a slight pang of guilt, I hoped they would understand our decision, given my parents' needs. But it was becoming clear that they were struggling to accept it. The house was nearing completion, and each visit brought us closer to our dream home. My husband, like me, was eager to move in, though I found myself torn between the excitement of starting fresh and the desire for everything to feel just right. Halfway through the project, my parents visited to see the progress, their joy and gratitude filling me with a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, I noticed my husband had been visiting his parents almost every weekend lately. Are you planning to visit your parents again this weekend? I asked, curious about his frequent trips. Yeah, I am, he replied, almost absent-mindedly. I've noticed you've been visiting them a lot lately, I remarked, a bit unsure of the frequent visits. I want to show them I appreciate them, he said. That's why I've been making an effort to visit on my days off. Understanding his intentions, I asked, should I come along? I was worried his parents might feel left out or disappointed, especially if they were hoping they'd be the ones to move in with us. I thought it might be a good idea to show goodwill by visiting them. But he reassured me, it's fine, I can handle it, and left for his parents' house. I decided to respect his choice, promising to support him in whatever way he needed. As time flew by, our new house was finally ready, moving day arrived, and as we loaded up the car with boxes, I felt a rush of excitement about the fresh start ahead. Pulling up to the house, I could barely contain my enthusiasm. Wow, our new home, I exclaimed, overcome with emotion. It felt like the beginning of something truly special. I began daydreaming about our future there, cooking meals while watching my husband play with our future children in the yard, hosting family barbecues. These thoughts only fueled my excitement even more. Just then, my parents called. They were supposed to move in with us, but they were delayed. I replied, Tiffany, you have excellent taste, my mother-in-law complimented, her voice warm with approval. Well, I suppose I can give her some credit for that, I said, nodding gratefully, but to my shock, they began unloading an enormous amount of luggage from their car. Confused, I quickly asked, Mother-in-law, father-in-law, why do you have so much stuff? What are you planning to do? Their response completely blindsided me. What do you mean? We're moving our things into this house, they said nonchalantly. You're planning to live here starting today, but you'll need to ask your parents to leave. My heart sank, and disbelief crept into my voice. Why are you doing this? I asked, frustration bubbling up. My mother-in-law's explanation came quickly. As a new bride, it's customary to prioritize your husband's family. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me struggling to process the unexpected shift in our plans. The joy of our new home seemed to fade as family expectations and my own carefully laid out dreams collided. Desperate for support, I turned to my husband, but when his parents declared their intent to move in, He simply sighed and said, "Just let your parents know gently." I felt my world tilt. This house was meant for me and my parents. I protested. "I can't accept this decision." His frustration was clear. "Didn't my mom just explain? It's natural for a wife to prioritize her husband's family. We can deal with your parents later." I was stunned. It became painfully obvious that my husband was either heavily influenced by his parents or shared their views, which now seemed to be entirely in their favor. "Come on, help with the moving," he urged, as his parents began unloading their belongings, before my parents or I had even set foot inside the house. "Oh, it's just beautiful. The interior is so lovely," they exclaimed, eagerly exploring the house. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Do you even know whose house this is?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. "What?" they replied, clearly caught off guard. After a moment, they faced me, asserting, "Whose house? Of course, it's Jesse's house. Are you suggesting you have a claim to it?" My anger flared. "Since you and Jesse are living here and he's put so much into this house, you have no right to claim anything without hearing us out first," I said, feeling my frustration grow. It seemed they had jumped to conclusions, blaming me without knowing the full story of how we had financed the house. "Why would your parents live in Jesse's house in the first place?" they questioned, their tone now laced with scorn. "Yes, it's strange. Poor Jesse, stuck with such a demanding wife and parents," they added, clearly mocking. I felt myself reaching my breaking point. Why am I being criticized for their misunderstanding? "If you plan to live here, then Jesse should make up for the costs," I shot back. "I've contributed to this house," I said, facing their disbelief head-on. "How much are you claiming to have paid?" "Maybe a small amount, $100? They mocked, their disbelief palpable. My husband, looking visibly uncomfortable, stayed silent. I turned to him, demanding, "Are you being honest? How high and mighty do you think you are?" He hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. "What are you insinuating?" my mother-in-law demanded, her voice turning stern. Noticing my husband's hesitation, I decided it was time to set the record straight. "I paid for this house entirely with my savings," I said firmly. "If you plan to live here, I expect you to repay me $460,000 for the cost of the house." The room went still. My in-laws were stunned, their mouths hanging open, eyes wide in shock. They quickly turned to my husband, searching for confirmation. "Jesse, is this true? Did Tiffany buy this house?" they asked, their voices filled with disbelief. My husband nodded, though it was barely noticeable. "Yes, Tiffany bought the house. She was promoted recently and now earns more than I do." Then, with a hint of regret, he added, "But I made a huge mistake at work. I can't be promoted anymore, and my pay got cut. I'm now earning as much as a new employee." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. It was a revelation none of us had expected, and the weight of it settled heavily in the room. My in-laws, now fully processing the situation, looked at me with a mix of disbelief and understanding. Their attitude toward me shifted dramatically, though I could still sense the remnants of their discomfort. "Tiffany, we're truly sorry for what we said earlier. We misunderstood everything. Please forgive us and let us stay in this house," my in-laws pleaded, their voices full of regret and apology. My husband, too, bowed deeply. "Please, it's my fault for not telling you sooner. Let us stay here with you." Their sudden shift in demeanor, full of regret, took me by surprise. Despite their apologies, I stood firm. "No matter how much you beg, I can't accept this. I built this house for me and my parents. If that's not possible, then there's no point in keeping it. If you want to live here, you'll need to pay me $460,000. Their faces fell as they responded, "We don't have that kind of money." "Then it seems you'll need to find somewhere else to go," I said, my tone resolute. "Wait," they interjected, their desperation growing. "We sold our previous home and moved out." When they realized that they could be evicted from our new house, they became even more frantic. "Tiffany, please let us stay. Your parents can live with us too," they begged. The thought of living under one roof with both sets of parents seemed completely overwhelming to me. "I can't agree to that. If you sold your house, you must have some savings left. Why not use that to find a flat?" I asked. Tears welled up in their eyes. "The truth is, we lost a lot in a bad investment. The money from selling our house, plus our retirement savings, all went into paying off that debt. We have nothing left. I'm retired, and my wife can't work at her age. You're our only hope," they confessed, their voices tinged with despair. Despite their heartfelt plea, I couldn't ignore the fact that this situation stemmed from their own financial mismanagement. "If you need help, shouldn't you be asking your son for support?" "I'm not in a position to take on this responsibility," I replied. "Aren't we family too?" they asked, their voices shaking with emotion. "That's too much to ask," I said, standing firm. "Can't you at least find some way to help your